Once again, good morning. Welcome to our session. This morning, we're going to have our second session titled Increasing Your Leasing Win Rates with Self-Guided and Smart and Assisted and Smart Tours. We've got a great plan put together for you today and some great panelists. Before I do the introduction of our panelists, I do want to recognize the fact that this entire event is done through sponsors and vendors. And we do have a sponsor for today's session. And so I'd like to introduce Liz Garza with Cox to come up, and she has a short message for us about Cox and what they bring to the multifamily space.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Garza, account manager at Cox Communication. It is my privilege to be here with you today at the Tech Home Building Summit, where innovation meets expertise in the home building industry. In our pursuit to create homes that aren't just structures, but ecosystems of connectivity and convenience, we've learned the universal truth. Technology is not just about the label smart. It is about how deeply it resonates with the human experience. In the heart of every home we build at Cox Communities, there lies a power of fiber network. It is the backbone that supports not only the seamless streaming and browsing we all enjoy, but also the more critical aspects of life, like ensuring that our children's online learning experience is uninterrupted and that our family security system is always on guard. But the potential of the fiber network is truly unlocked when it's paired with smart home technology. When IoT devices respond to our needs almost immediately, that's when our home becomes a house. We understand that integrating smart home technology is not a cakewalk. It comes with challenges, compatibility, user-friendly, trust. That's where our role as trusted advisors become key. We're not here to simply push product, but to listen, to understand the unique needs of every builder, and to tailor solutions that build not just home, but trust and revenue. Our partnerships are testament of our approach. Working together with you, we have seen projects transform from build blueprints to beautiful communities. These successes are not just measured in numbers, but in the smiles of families who their expectations are not just met, but exceeded. But let's remember, innovation without collaboration is like a blueprint without a builder. So I invite you today to join us. Let's combine our strengths to craft homes that aren't just part of the future, but are ready for the future. On behalf of Cox Communities and the Cox team that is here today, thank you for your time, and we look forward to building the future together.
We really appreciate Cox Communities and our other sponsors that make this event happen, particularly all the conversations that we had yesterday, that we're going to have today, tomorrow, all fundamentally assume that we have amazing internet in our buildings and all the different devices and technology. So what they provide, particularly in terms of a managed service, can be fundamental to success for everything we've talked about. Okay, turning to our panel today, I'm going to have our two panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start first with Cam.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Cam Margison. I am here from the team at Rently. So in my job, I work with multifamily operators, owners, built to rent in road mapping out their technology initiatives, whether it's a greenfield or a brownfield, a retrofit, new build, looking at what are the strategic initiatives that they're looking to accomplish by incorporating technology such as self-guided tours or a greater smart home IoT ecosystem.
And next up, we have Julie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Halsey, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Bluestone Properties. About a year ago, maybe two now, we sold our entire portfolio and we are in big development mode. So we've got about 5,000 units under development right now. And so we're kind of in asset management mode, but from a marketing and operational standpoint, we've spent the last 2 years really vetting technologies and seeing what's out in the market so that when we do get back into operations mode, we're positioned to like really use technology to make our teams very successful. So I'm happy to be here to bring a marketing perspective. Morning.
It's always the additional energy from marketing, right? She teamed up with
Yes, I know
Carol. You're
Carol
going to hear
and
from
Eric.
Carol tomorrow in both of our sessions, who's also in marketing,
Yes.
and they are definitely
Erica.
two birds of a feather for sure in what they're doing. So our purpose from the session description today is residents are seeking technology that improves their well-being and sense of comfort. This session explores feel-good tech that fosters healthier living environments, from smart lighting to air quality management. We're going to learn how to integrate that tech that promotes relaxation, productivity, convenience, ensuring that our residents feel good in every aspect of their living space. That's the wrong definition, isn't it? We're not talking about feel-good tech. All of a sudden, I'm like, what? That is not right. So I apologize when I put my slides together. Let's get this right, okay? Here we go. Today, we're going to talk about increasing your leasing win rates with technology, okay? We're going to talk about ways you can take tech to be able to increase those leasing rates. We're going to break it up into 4 areas. Okay, first, we're going to look at setting the stage. Second, we're going to talk about ways we can maximize leasing success. Third, we're going to look at ways we can elevate. Is this the wrong slide to deck two? Are we off? No, we're right. Okay, now I'm totally rattled. We're going to talk about elevating assisted tours, and then we're going to talk about real world results. Okay, let's get in the groove here. Okay. First off, let's throw it to Cam. We're going to talk about setting the stage and what are some things we want to do to be able to set the stage. So Cam, can you discuss kind of the foundational elements of smart home ecosystems and the key considerations for property owners and operators like we have here in the room when you're trying to implement smart home technology when it comes to helping in this area?
Yeah. So the first thing that we always want to talk about is what are your goals? What are you looking to accomplish? It's not just simply about putting a smart lock on a door, smart integrated thermostat onto the wall. Are you chasing a value add benefit? Are you chasing a asset valuation in the market, trying to distinguish yourself? Are you trying to appeal to a certain renter demographic? Maybe you're looking for a more modern renter, maybe a more affluent, higher income earner renter that wants those types of technologies. There's so many different reasons why you might want to implement this technology. So we always take the approach of what is the goal first, talking nuts and bolts about building your ecosystem. I think over the past 5 years, the space has really evolved. Originally, you go back 5-10 years to IoT implementation. It was very much about breadth, having the smart lights, having everything integrate. And I think more so as we move forward, folks are looking at ways to consolidate and say, what is the biggest bang for my buck in terms of making that capital investment and having it have a downline impact on either people, process, operations, streamlining cost. When we look at building the smart home ecosystem in any unit or apartment community, there's a couple different things that you want to look at, right? So you want to look at what is the connectivity backbone of that system. So there's a lot of different options out there. You can go the connected Ethernet route, the Wi-Fi route. For us, we prioritize giving you the optionality. So with Rently, we offer a tri-band hub, which has 3 different modes to connect to the cloud. So it can connect over Wi-Fi if you have managed bulk Wi-Fi established already. You can connect hardwired via Ethernet. But if you don't have that put into place, we don't want to limit your scalability and your ability to deploy smart homes. So that's why we leverage 4G cellular. That really takes that piece out of the equation, where if it's an asset that doesn't have established network backbone, you can rely on that cellular. So that's the first thing that you need to consider, is how is that in-unit gateway, often commonly referred to as the hub, how is that supercomputer in the unit communicating to the larger cloud-based operating system? And are you set up to facilitate that communication. So that's the first thing that you want to think about. The other thing that you want to consider is how are the devices communicating locally between each other and back to that hub. And that hub really acts as that supercomputer inside the unit, inside the home. It is sending commands, receiving information, uploading that back to the cloud, and then the on-site teams are using that dashboard connected to the cloud to actually manage the system remotely. So for us, we prioritize, well, I should say there's a lot of different smart home protocols out there. You have your Zigbee, which I think was very big in kind of residential. You have your LoRa, which is a wide area, low power network. You have Z-Wave, Matter, Bluetooth. Even devices can communicate over Wi-Fi. We prioritize Z-Wave. We like that it has the S2 encryption, so it's a little bit more secure than some of the other open protocols. It has low latency, low power consumption. Every protocol has its merit. There's no good or bad. It's what's best for your specific use case. If I was talking to someone in industrial ag or in medical or in someone that's doing large smart cities, I would probably be talking about LoRa, right? Because that is the benefit of that network protocol. But for us, we really do prioritize Z-Wave. So those devices are all communicating across a mesh network, which makes even more resiliency. So if one device goes down, the other devices can connect and pick up that gap in the connection.
And for those that may not be familiar, with a Wi-Fi hub, that's sending a signal all the way to each of the devices. And so if you have devices that are on the edge of the perimeter, the further they are from that hub, you may have some issues where mesh literally talks.
A repeater.
Each device is a repeater that they can pass it to the device that's closest to it, which allows you to continue to extend that out. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the standard quoted distance for Z-Wave is about 30 feet, but 100% what you said, pretty much any device can act as a repeater, so it extends that signal. So that hub sends a signal out to the smart thermostat that can then extend out to the front door lock, strengthening the signal, making it easier for that information to communicate back and forth. So I always like to just touch on the protocols and understanding. I think there's, when I work with new clients and kind of understanding going from a fractured system to something more consolidated, more streamlined, more all-in-one, it's really important to understand how that connection is going to take place. Is it going to be a local action? Is it going to be something that's going from cloud over an API? Is it something that's done via an SDK in that specific device? Having someone walk you through how those actions are going to happen is then ultimately going to allow you to understand how you can then expand out, right? Because a lot of what we see is most of the first deployments, they start with the lock because that is where the resident spends the most amount of time interacting with any given IoT device. I have a smart lock on my door, use it all the time, interact with it multiple times throughout the day. That is where you also see the biggest operational benefits of reducing rekeys, so on and so forth. But inevitably, you're going to want to expand that technology. So having the ability to have that done within one provider, one ecosystem, I think that's the value that most folks are looking for now. Yeah, I think going back, that was super IoT heavy, and I know we're also talking about self-guided tours here. So I think in incorporating the technology, again, the premise is to have a solution provider that can do it all. That is what ultimately enables you to start to incorporate the technology. So when we're talking about the self-guided tour piece and incorporating any sort of smart devices, it's what is the experience that you want for that renter, and what is the value you want to bring to the on-site team. So perfect example, I don't want to have my renter trying to find a lockbox, dealing with keys. I don't want my on-site team to have to worry about lost keys, lost fobs, whatever it is. Anything that's physical can always be lost. So that's where we immediately pivot to saying, okay, let's have a more streamlined process. I think yesterday someone talked about taking the friction out. That is the gold standard that we always look for. What is the friction point that renter is going to come across or that your team is going to come across? And how can we use technology to actually solve that and make it easier? And we've done a lot of research on this, and there's a very clear percentage point increase when that renter on a self-guided tour has a more streamlined experience. Those survey feedbacks are about a 20 percentage point increase on positive renter sentiment. They also convert at roughly a 10 to 15% higher rate because they just have an easier time. Nothing is worse than going to a community, seeing 10 million signs with QR codes saying, I need to go here, I need to go there. And the renter is finally like, you know what? I don't even want to see the apartment anymore. I give up. I'm going to go rent somewhere else. So how can we make that entire process just easier for them? That's also why we have really pushed forward on our wayfinding technology, which we can talk a little bit more about later. But that's really the final piece of solving that equation.
So I want to pitch over to Julie now. I teach at a university level, and we saw some dramatic changes over the last 5 years as we went into the pandemic and came out of the pandemic, and how education is done, and technology played a pretty big part in that. As we're talking about how technology has progressed, can you speak a little bit to how that has impacted touring, what you've seen at your company, and kind of what the industry is seeing broader as a whole with respect to technology and giving tours?
Okay, so I think this is two parts. I think we're talking about self-guided tours and then, of course, smart homes. And so in order to answer the first part of that question, I think we need to look back a couple of years and see where we were at with touring. And in 2018, your average renter would physically tour with a leasing consultant 4 to 6 times before they actually made their buying decision. Of course, we roll into 2020, and our customers are put in a position where they're forced to make a huge buying decision about where they live, right? Online or self-guided. And the customers found that, wait, this wasn't as scary as maybe I thought it was going to be. This was a good decision. And so I think we want to have this tech here, right? So now we're finding that it's really important to have multiple modes of representation for your community, whether that's the self-guided tour, the virtual tours, the smart tours, all of those things. And we know that our customers want this because when we looked at the data in 2024, the average time that a prospect will go and tour now with a physical leasing agent is 2, maybe 3 times. So that's one thing. But then when we're talking about the expectation for the smart home, the things inside the tech-savvy apartment, we know that Gen Z is entering the workforce and they're looking for their first independent apartment home. And they now make up 25% of the total renters, right? That's 25%. Then you go to millennials next, at being 31%. And so not as much with millennial, but definitely with Gen Z, having a tech-savvy home, it's a basic essential for them. It's not a nice to have, a want to have.
It's table stakes.
It really plays into one of their top 4 to 5 reasons why they're going to rent an apartment home. So on both fronts, the expectation is high, and I believe it will get higher.
So I'm curious, in the room here, for those of you that are operating properties, in 2018, how many of you were doing virtual tours? Okay, 2. Our 2 marketing people. How many of you are doing virtual tours today?
No.
Okay, a lot more hands. It really is a change. And I think we sometimes feel like we're getting dragged along, and like, we just have to do that because everyone else is doing it. But what we're hoping to present today is not only should you, of course, be doing it because everyone's doing it, but how can you make sure you're doing it well? And as we kind of move into our next phase here, talking about how can we, because the end result here is not just to spend a bunch of money on technology because everyone else is doing it, but it should make our lives better. It should result in quantifiable, improved metrics when it comes to our leasing process. And as we talk about how to maximize success, let me kick it over to Cam. Tell us a little about what are some things you feel are important to maximizing success using technology.
Yeah, in terms of the self-guided tour piece and maximize, let's talk about the basic part is getting the feedback and integrating that on-site team into the overall buying experience. I think that's a base thing, and it doesn't always get done to the way that it needs to be done. But it's not just about let's ship you a lock and set you up, like integrating it into their entire workflow and systems. I think that is the starting off point. You mind going back to the previous? I just want to make sure I'm covering all the questions here. So in terms of maximizing the technology, again, it's all value add. I always use the adage of any self-guided tour community I'm working with in the Atlanta market, they want that community to be like Fort Knox, right? They want it to be super secure. They don't want to have any concerns about someone being in there. So that's where we immediately pivot and start having a conversation and saying, hey, we can get you a motion sensor. We can get you window and door sensors. That way, we're always pre-screening out those prospects before they even get to the community. So that's a given. We're also geo-fencing out that community. So if a prospective renter is not in that geo-fenced area, they're never going to get codes to access the community. And that's really to prevent, account takeovers, various, nefarious behavior, things like that. So before we even let them into the community, there's already that baked in security component. Now we're just scaling up for peace of mind, right? So if I'm concerned my model unit is on the first floor and renters are always going in there and leaving the window open, I want to put a window sensor on that window to make sure that if it's left open, I'm alerted. We're going to talk a little bit more about if-then triggers. Is anyone staying at the Hyatt like me? Am I the only one? No? Okay. Well, I noticed this. So you noticed this being in the industry. So I turned because I'm from Chicago, so it's hot for me here. And so I turned the AC down, and then I went out on the patio, opened up the patio door, and the thermostat automatically shut off, right? So we can set up those automations, right? Where if you don't want to run the electric bill on your heating, or conversely gas bill on your, said the opposite, but you get what I'm getting at. We can set up that automation so that not only are you alerted, but proactively we're shutting off whatever is going to mitigate potential costs or damage to the specific unit or asset.
It's the grumpy dad's dream saying, having the door open, how are we air conditioning outside? It's like we're systemizing so that can't happen.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so it's all value add. When we talk about the lock component, there's two different ways that you can handle a lock in a self-guided tour experience, at least that we work with. You can go on the Bluetooth route, and then you can go the full hub-connected lock route. Bluetooth is great because it is an affordable entry point, right? I don't need a hub for it, but we have kind of seen the trend move away from Bluetooth because once you have that smart lock in place, you really want the remote management capability. I want to know, did a renter leave the door open? I want to know, is it unlocked? I want to know, what is the status of that lock, even though I'm the manager sitting at home at my couch. Again, it's all about creating that peace of mind. I want to know it's winter in Chicago and maintenance didn't go into our model unit to turn up the heat, and I don't want my pipes to burst. I want to be able to remote into that thermostat, set the setting if I need to, or better yet, set up the settings to begin with where you have run times and set levels so that that temperature is always at the ambient temperature without any manual actions whatsoever. It becomes a set it and forget it type of security and asset protection put into place.
So, Julie, in what ways are you using technology to maximize your success? And are using some of the things that he's describing?
So, and of course, I'm going to answer this from the marketing purview here.
Sure.
But so one of the things I think that's really interesting is operators is that sometimes we look at our tech stack as being like mutually exclusive, right? Where you've got, okay, in this bucket, we've got, the self-guided tour, and over here, we've got smart homes and all those things. So the opportunity for us is if we find ways to integrate technology through the entire life cycle of the customer, right? So the self-guided tour part is the first touch point, is like a prospect, right? And I think as an industry, we just kind of forget about the rest of that because the touch points are prospect, move in, maintenance request, renewal, and move out. And so we try to find as many ways to use tech that solve pain points for our customers on all 5 touch points. So it's a huge opportunity if you can find ways to just solve problems throughout the life cycle of the customer.
So I have a question because we were talking about this last night because you are putting a podcasting room in one of your new assets. So I'm curious, and I have a long play for this, but how did you decide to put that into that specific asset?
Right, well, we do a lot of market research and we try to identify who our ideal customer is, right? One of our core values at our company is we're customer eccentric, and that means for all avenues of our organization. But we go back and we really look at, okay, what does the customer want? What are the things that they're paying for outside of their rent, and how can we solve that? And with Gen Z, it's amazing how many, I don't even remember the statistic, but we were looking at like how often podcasts are uploaded to Spotify and Apple and all of these other places. And it was crazy. And we were like, wow, the fee is kind of nominal for that, right? So why don't we, so we have in Surprise, Arizona. We're putting in a podcast room and the residents can use it and record and upload and do whatever they need. And so it's just a way that we're trying to use tech to amenitize and make life easier for residents.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I think that foot traffic is something that tells a lot about the value of a community, and it's so hard to track in just a traditional asset, right? So once you start to shift to code-based access, where you're tracking when those codes are registering, how many times someone has gone through that access panel into the pool area or the kids' playroom, you can actually start to gather data on what are the valuable amenities that both current residents, but also prospective residents are interested in. So we try to enable in the self-guided tour experience to allow them to pick and choose specifically what they want. Do they want to see everything in the community, one specific unit? What amenities do they want to see? So they get a picker at the beginning of that tour to say, okay, you know, I'm definitely allergic to dogs. I definitely don't want to go to the dog park, but I'd love swimming. I'm going to go to the swimming pool. And then we route them, and then we share that information to you both in the tour notes, so it's available in the CRM and the PMS that your teams are working in, but also in the smart home portal as well, so that you have a track on where is the heat points throughout the community. So this is actually something that we're developing coming up soon here, where we're going to give you information on heat points throughout the community. And I think that's really valuable as you try and understand, you know, because giving up that square footage to amenities, if no one uses it, that is a huge cost to forego, and it's not bringing value. So how do you assess value? And unfortunately, renters aren't always great about completing surveys, but feet talk, and that's a really great way to assess how people are actually utilizing your community.
Does that heat map, is that based just on what codes were entered? So we see a lot of codes for this particular spot. I know that with some of the managed Wi-Fi products, you can also then triangulate based on the Wi-Fi signal and kind of where they are within the facility as well. Have either of you had any experience using that type of data to also identify where people are spending their time?
I guess I'll go first. Not from the Wi-Fi piece, but we recently integrated CCTV and surveillance technology, and we're looking at a lot of exciting stuff on how we can integrate that with the self-guided tour experience to give you, from a marketing and operational standpoint, better visibility, but also better security. And then conversely, how can we transport that back to the renter so they can sort of go through this memory lane of what did I see and what did I interact with? So we're looking at different ways to take those snippets of recordings, link them all together, have them appear in the management portal for the teams to leverage, but then also sending that back to the renter. Because I don't know if you've ever toured. I used to do leasing myself, and you know, I was an apartment locator in Chicago for a while, and it's funny, after eight or so apartments, the renter's like, okay, what did I see? I'll apply for the first one, right? And it's like sometimes they like it, sometimes they just don't even know, and they're just like, I just want to be done. How can we start to give them that helpful hints, those feedbacks in those video recordings? So that's something that we're excited about. To your question, in terms of triangulating, there is the ability through CCTV to assess traffic through, so you can actually get person counts of coming and going in amenity spaces. I personally think that the code, registering codes on an activity log accomplishes the same thing, but there's a lot of different ways that you can skin the cat.
And I appreciate you allowing me to go a little bit off script.
No, it's all good.
I'm curious as well, Julie, when we talk about like metrics, what are the metrics you're looking at for leasing success in terms of, obviously we know conversions at the end, but what are some of the numbers you're looking at as you're working them through the funnel?
Right. So one of the things that, you know, so I'm going to get on my marketing soapbox for just a second here. So one of the things when we talk about this is apartments are a destination sell, right? And, you know, I drive-by shouldn't ever be a thing, because I'm telling you, nobody is like driving by and going, oh, there's an apartment, I think I'm going to get me one, right? So I think first of all, it's understanding like truly how your residents at the top of the funnel are going to consume that technology. And they're going to start with your smartphone, right? So we know that they want the transparency, right? So we look at the transparency, how the ease of access to pricing, availability, because we know they can see our comps, right? And then when they get to the community, are we allowing them to consume our community in a way that fits their needs? And the only way that you can, I think, be inclusive is by using lots of different technology. Because that's what's memorable. Because when there are, 500,000 apartment homes in one market, it does bleed together. But if you can find that tech thing that's memorable, that's where you see the conversion. And there are some properties where like, oh, no, that's that podcast place. Like, what was that again?
Right.
And they go and look at that. So it really
becomes a differentiator.
It is. So, I think apartment is an apartment, but it's, the soft programming, the things that we can do in there that help conversion and make you memorable.
Yeah, I think I talked about this yesterday. The idea, I think there's a lot of companies out there that are starting to look at how hotel brands are operating and saying, how can we mimic that to make our renters stickier? How can we get them set up that every time they rent at this specific type of community with us, that they know exactly what they're getting. They know what technology package they're getting, the level of service they're getting, the resident benefits that they're getting. And I think smart home is a huge part of that, right? I used yesterday the adage of laundry in unit. Once you have laundry in unit, it's really hard to rent a place without it. I've done it before. It's terrible. I never want to do it again. Once you start to have those conveniences in place, I don't want to leave you. I want to continue to rent within your family of brands of communities because I know what I'm getting and I like what I'm getting.
Right. Well, and the other thing, last comment on that too, is that, when the residents are there as it relates to retention, there are lots of really interesting tech things that we've looked at that are gamifying the resident experience, right? Gamification and you do this and giving back to, the Gen Z and millennials are very into, well, I think we all are, but like giving back to certain charities, what about if $1 of your rent goes here? And so, you gamify it enough where they earn points to make differences in their community. So, that sense of community really is important in a way. They're global citizens now, right? So it's that connectivity is important, and I think we do that through tech.
So one of the things we do at this session is we're trying to introduce you to the technology that already exists, that's out there. Services like Rently and other companies you're going to see out on the exhibit floor. Here's what we're doing now. When I met with Cam before this session, as we were preparing for it, one of the things I did challenge him is I want to do a little bit of vision casting and talk a little bit about what could it be. Maybe we're not there yet, but we can feel that we're really, really close to this. And so to talk about the future of property touring, we've already streamlined the ability for them to be able to easily access the apartment, and we know that we're already having them know about us from their smartphone. What other information might we be able to glean about that particular prospect based on, their IP address or other things that we see once they've started to leave their digital footprint with us? And then as they've requested a virtual tour, either by questions we've asked them or other things we can infer about them as maybe the pre-application process, how can we then customize their experience? Like you said, do you want to see the dog park? Do you want to see this? But even when you go into the space itself, where they're going to be spending their time, if they decide to choose this as a home, can we personalize where a virtual assistant in the room welcomes them? We know when we go to hotels now, it's pretty common for us to go in and we see the TV and it's got our name and it just kind of feels like they were expecting me and they know who I am. Is it, can we have the lighting automatically turn on? Can it be dynamic depending upon the time of day? Can we potentially have some modes that they can kind of cycle through to see what this apartment feels like in the morning versus the afternoon, the evening, through like circadian lighting? To be able to show them that this apartment has technology, we have those table stakes. What are some other things as you're kind of vision casting what you think we could see in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think something that I was talking to our CEO about 2 days ago, I'm personally very excited about NFC. I think that the idea that I can go, whether I'm a prospective renter or a current resident, and I can access any point throughout the community and my phone stays in my pocket the entire time. A lot of that is possible right now through code-based access, but just eliminating that action, right? And just allowing them to walk up to that door, hear the click, open it, streamlined. I think that is probably one of the next big things that I'm excited to see. I don't see it a lot currently. I think the other piece that we're working on too is how can we're already taking, like you said, IP information, facial biometrics. How can we then take modularity in that and incorporate it later on in your application process to mitigate potential fraud or anything that's going to come up later on down the line? How can we start to incorporate that later on for enhanced security? A lot of it is based off of if and then triggers, as we like to say. So if a motion sensor detects movement in the unit, then automatically the lights come on, right? That's a really easy call to make. If motion sensor detects motion in a unit, I think you talked about scent diffusers. The nice thing about having a provider that does everything all together is you bring us a device and you say, I see the value in having this at scale and deploying this, and I think this is going to bring a lot of value to my communities and also potentially a lot of value to other communities. Can you help me in building this? Because we make and manufacture our entire hub of everything, firmware, motherboard, updates, everything is done by Rently, no problem. The amount of co-development conversations I have on a weekly basis is always shocking to me compared to some of the other companies I have been at. So you bring us that automation, we'll say, well, we can make that happen. You want the renter to come in, and as they sequentially go through the apartments, lights come on. Yep. Absolutely, we can do that. Do you want a trigger to go over to the home assistant, whether it's an Alexa or an Apple HomeKit, and have something read out for the prospect?
Or play a certain type of music.
Exactly.
To further that ambiance.
Yeah, and so we're rolling out next year our touchscreen hub, which is a hub that is both a thermostat as well as the hub and really just an entire command center. And so you want to talk about one-touch commands right from that spot, whether you're the leasing agent or the renter. They have the ability to have those controls and automations at their fingertips easily. So that's something that we're excited about as well. And to talk about the pre-recorded messages, we're working on rolling out a virtual leasing agent where there are going to be those custom videos playing for that prospect as they enter in, and then it's all triggered and streamlined up through Rently.
Julie, your thoughts in this?
So kind of conceptually here, we're talking about personalization and value. And the key word for me there is personal. There's like nothing more personal than home, right? And so then when you try to merge value with that, we always train our sales team, okay, well, what is value? Well, value is perception. That's what it is. And so when you can figure out ways, to make that touring experience, like kind of anecdotally, it's like for me, I know if I'm going to test drive a car and I'm in there and I'm feeling what it looks, I'm probably going to buy it. And this gives residents a way to kind of test drive what their living experience would be like when you automate these things. And one other thing that I think that from a personalization standpoint is that we know that more residents have pets than they have children. And so finding ways when we're talking about innovations with pet parks or babysitting or treats or training and those types of things, incorporating that in the living experience, I think is something future forward that I think we should keep an eye on.
I think I talked about this with you, but I'm giving you a little bit of a curveball here. But I think there's also a little bit, the personalization thing comes up all the time. And also, what is the lived experience like being in that community, in that location? What are the shops nearby? Where am I going to work out? Where am I going to get my groceries from? Who's going to be my vet? I think that there's a lot of potential to look at how you can make smart home assistants be sort of a digital concierge. But the challenge, I think, for leasing teams is coaching them how to incorporate that into their process. And if it's a self-guided tour, how do you make that renter aware? Are you making them aware at the onset before they tour, sending them that initial email and saying, hey, take advantage of X, Y, and Z in the apartment? I personally, I think signage is like the thing that a lot of folks use, but I drastically want for something better. And I guess I'd be curious to hear.
You're shaking your head. So.
I'd be curious to hear what you think.
No, so for us, we go as like friendly as possible, because that when somebody, for example, like they're gonna hop in the car with their brochure, they're gonna throw it in the back seat with the other 6 or 7 buildings that they toured. Yeah. So for us, we know just based on our analytics, like especially since GA4 rolled out, that 99% of apartment searches start on a mobile device. And so we make sure that we're using technology that not only tells like, okay, this person is on an iPhone, it's this iOS, it's this generation, so that you can serve up an experience that's so unique. And we can tell based on the things, we know that they're looking for, I don't know, they've got a pet, this is important to them, and we can serve up that unique experience to them online in the mobile format. So, I mean, even for example, like even contact and business cards, we've got system airdrop those things. We try to make it as effortless as possible because we know this is the one thing everybody always has in their hand. So we serve them up this way.
Yeah.
I grew up watching Star Trek. I'm definitely a technology adopter. I was just looking, within my Wi-Fi at home, there are 80 connected devices throughout my home, okay? So lots of IoT happening in my house, and I have, it's definitely not integrated, right? If you look at my folder of smart home apps, I've got way too many apps because I'll see a really cool feature and I want to try that feature. We've got Amazon Echoes in almost every single room in our house, so we can do announcements. But if I go to my little recipe maker in Amazon, I've got all kinds of rules that I experiment with that have turned those Echoes into where when I walk into a room, some of the lights will turn on. I've even got it to like in a bathroom. If I walk into the bathroom between midnight and 6, instead of all the lights glowing on, they'll turn on red so I can see, but it's not going to wake up my wife who's having that light shine on her. I can definitely envision not too far in the future where we have the ability that when they're scheduling it, we can gather that demographic data. We can say what type of music are they likely to like. When they walk in, we're going to have the lights turn on. We're going to have music that we think is appealing to them play. We're going to have a particular scent that will be in that room based on who that person is, whether it's more of a scent that might be something that a woman wants versus a man wants. If we know they've got a pet, right when they walk in, the little automatic pet feeder drops some food and they think, oh, that's cool. I can envision my dog being here. That future is right amongst us. The technology is capable of doing that. We'll probably still need some integrators to kind of wrap that up in a bow to make that scalable for multifamily. But we certainly should be thinking and trying to be on the leading edge of how can I deploy that, what does work now, and how can I use that technology to be able to get more leads, to have them come to or faster from the moment they learn about us, to shorten the buying time, and to use that process as a way to be able to sell some upgrades as well, which we'll talk about in this afternoon.
And I'll say, to add on that, Brandon, what we want to try and do is, I'm assuming that took a while to set up all those triggers.
Yeah. It's not easy as it should be. It's still a lot of friction.
Yeah. And I in my last place had the same thing. I'd say good morning to my Alexa and lights would come on. I'd get NPR and so on and so forth. What we want to do is take that process away from the teams and make it easier, right? Yep. So that you tell us the automation that you want built in, and we can do it at scale. We can build up those triggers across your entire portfolio. So rather than having, a property manager or a leasing team member have to go in and painstakingly be in the Alexa app and doing this, if then, if that it's just simply a toggle on in the back end, and you can roll that out across your entire portfolio. That's what we really want to accomplish.
Remove that friction, and I think that's important. Okay, so before we move on to kind of elevating these tours even further, any questions you have so far? You can repeat the question.
Yeah, so curious if it's unified across different properties. So if I'm a renter at 123 Main Street with Rentley Smart Home, and I walk down the street to 124 Main Street, is my fob going to enter into that community? Is that? Yeah, we certainly could set that up in like a property grouping. I guess the only concern it would arise is potentially people accessing the community that don't live there. I live in Chicago, and there's a company called Flats where they use universal amenities. So if you live at any Flats building, you can go and use the pool at another one. So I certainly see that use case. It's not something we have seen requested yet, but it's definitely possible. Most panels, from just a common area access standpoint, are able to hold thousands of codes. So whether it's a fob, a credential reader or a specific numeric code assigned to that resident. All you're really doing is granting access through that specific panel, and that's pretty easy to do.
Carol, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you have some multiple locations where there are some kind of shared services. Do you have the ability to kind of do that across properties? Yeah.
The challenge, the only thing I'm thinking of is for us, a lot of the credential access when it goes to the resident is linked up to the move-in within the PMS, right? So as you move that future resident to move in, whether it's Entrata, Yardi, RealPage, they're automatically getting a text and an email from us, and it's all linked up to that property structure. So you can manually then go in and add access to another property, but I guess the challenge is where that automation takes place. I'd be curious to pick your brain about how you're doing it to automate that when properties are set up separately and the move-in processes are set up separately, how you can unify that across those systems. In terms of granting access to any panel, all you do is you're just going into that specific asset, that not asset as in a building, but asset as in the physical device, and saying, okay, I want this person, whether it's staff, visitor, a recurring, someone that recurringly accesses the community. Maybe it's a carpenter that comes in, or a lot of communities now are doing like on-demand services, a regular dog walker. You can either as the staff or as the resident grant access out.
And that'll be a good segue to some of our later sessions where we'll talk about those type of services. Other questions from our audience? Yes.
Good question. So we typically see anywhere like 75 to 86% conversion rate of prospect schedules a self-guided tour till they actually show up and complete that tour. In terms of the lease conversion rates, it varies based off of the asset demographics, things like that. But there is a much higher show ratio of when they actually schedule that tour and actually show up. I was talking about this yesterday, and you probably know the answer.
So what we see is that when you give residents multiple ways to view communities, right? We think about at the top of the sales funnel. When I was saying apartments were a destination sale, previously we saw that conversion times were 60, 90, 120 days, right? So when you give residents the ability to view your community and they do all of this homework, they naturally independently work themselves down the sales funnel, right? So by the time we're seeing them when they're doing self-guided tours, it's within 18 to 21 days that they actually convert. Now that doesn't mean that they haven't been looking online, right, for a few months before that, but when they actually get down to the sales funnel, the conversion time is shorter. And because they are a highly qualified prospect at that time, they convert, we expect that our leases converted about 33%. Our leasing agents convert at 33%. But when it comes to the self-guided tours.
But that was the in-person. So an in-person leasing agent doing it's going to close 1 out of 3.
33%.
Okay.
But when it's the self-guided, they close closer to 50%. Thank you. Yeah.
So an increase of 10% from someone else
I told her,
here.
I was like, Erica, chime in. Yeah, 10%.
So one, it is better conversion rates. Talk about the cost structure of this compared to what it was before.
Well, for us, we have a digital footprint that we look at, right? And you're going to have your core marketing stack. So that's a fixed cost for us. But what's unique about the self-guided tour is that once we have the hardware piece to it, that is staffing. The thing is, you have residents prospects actually, who can tour at lunch break, at noon. I think what you said that
the most popular time. Yeah.
Self-guided tours, the most popular time is at noon during the week, right? And so our leasing agents are able to kind of continue daily operations, taking care of the existing residents, right? So it's, I think it's a win-win for operations and then also for the customer because it's such a tailored experience for the customer.
They could do it at 6 a.m., they could do it at noon, they could do it first thing in the morning on Sunday, whatever works into their schedule, which means they're likely to come visit earlier than if they had to work around a schedule of a leasing agent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was sharing this statistic. So we look at lead time of when they schedule that tour to when they actually show up. Overwhelmingly, about 98% of those tours take place within 24 hours of when they schedule that tour. So there's just that immediacy. It's always been a conversation about you're hitting that renter at the peak of their interest. I was reading a research paper recently that said that 40% of renters said that they passed on an apartment because they just weren't able to see it in time or at a time that was most convenient for them. And you have to realize, the renters that I think a lot of folks want, they have a 9-to-5 job. And but I'm sure everyone can agree with this here. At 5 o'clock at the end of the day, the last thing you want to think about is calling up an apartment community that's probably already closed or is in the process of closing and trying to schedule a time with them if you can get a hold of them, because that's another challenge, right? They may be out on a tour, they might be away. So it's just the impact of self-guided tours is that it just gives them the ability to slot it in when it works for them most convenient, and that has a downline impact about how they see the community. You're taking a stress away. Moving is always rated as one of the most stressful parts of anyone's life. If you can take one piece out of it, you already are winning that renter over.
Right, and what I'll add to that from an operator's perspective, when you're talking about 5 o'clock, right? What happens in a leasing office from 4 to 6? All of the existing residents are coming in, talking about rent and packages and their pets and all of those different things. And so when you do the self-guided tour, right, you allow your leasing agents to focus on your residents during like those really high busy times, right? And so it frees up, during lunch break. So I think that you see, this is maybe not necessarily quantifiable per se, but the customer service is elevated. And maybe the data point that we should be looking at for that is resident retention. Like, what do our renewal conversions look like? Are they increasing year over year based on this?
Because we're talking about real world results, you actually have a community case study.
Yeah.
You want to share some of the key findings from this?
Yeah, so we did a case study. These were townhomes. The operator was with Willowbridge. And so the things we always want to highlight is how we can reduce those repetitive tasks, right? We were just talking about this, right? I think a lot of the times people get this idea in their head from folks like UDR that have gone 100%, you can't lease with a human being, right? And they think it's either or. But the reality is it's an integrated approach, right? So a lot of the times what self-guided tours are doing is they're the front line leasing, what you just talked about, dealing with the residents. So how can we automate those tasks? And so reducing those repetitive tasks and then allowing them to actually spend time with the current residents. There's also that downline renewal impact. I, as a property manager or leasing consultant, can spend more time with my residents, interact with them more, actually negotiate, why they want to stay at the community. I'm going to be more successful in my job. And then the nice part is, as those people come up that really want the human interaction, they get in touch with the leasing team, right? Maybe the first interaction is the self-guided tour, and then they say, you know what, I want to tour with a leasing team. I want to, ask some questions, pepper some questions, and then that leasing team closes it, right? So that is kind of how you're incorporating it into process. You're getting higher lead engagement with them because you're taking the time that team used to spend going around the property and actually showing it them, and they can actually be there working with human beings, which I as someone who used to do leasing, that is what those teams do best, right? Is actually like interacting with them, answering their questions, offering that level of service. And that level of service is a distinguisher for your community.
So if you're on the fence or thinking of investing more to do this, you'd like to download the case study. This will have some of the ROI, the business case as to why it's worth investing more to automate these. Give you a second to do that. And as we kind of wrap up here, we got 2 minutes left. Some of the key takeaways that I hope that you've pulled from this, and then I'll ask each of our panelists to give their final thoughts. Renters are increasingly expecting smart home technology. It is table stakes, and it factors in their decision as to where they're going to choose. You need to be able to showcase that technology as part of the tours, not just to make the tour easy for you, but to show them that this location has technology. In addition, you can use that technology to enhance the tour experience. You can increase your conversion rates. You can reduce your costs, particularly your variable costs, and decrease that decision cycle to get it done faster. This technology does have a positive ROI. Okay, quick 30 seconds to each of you. What are your kind of final thoughts to this audience?
Yeah, a data point that a client shared with me that has always stuck with me. It was at one of our annual summits a couple years ago, and it's not in the case study, but I love this data point. So I asked the question. I said, hey, in implementing self-guided tours, are you seeing changes in your leasing teams? Are you downsizing? And they say no. We are keeping the exact same teams. It is filling in the gaps that we have, but we are reducing our payroll expenses by 10%. That alone is huge. So when you look at the reductions in operating expenses, the rental income that's generated from them, it's a solution that pays for itself.
Reduce costs, increase revenue. That's advantage there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah.
Right. And I think just kind of my final takeaway for you guys is that, if we really have to stop thinking about tech stacks as being this or that. And if we can find a way to integrate tech through the customer cycle, it's a continuity of a customer experience that I think we'll see better, retention rates and conversion rates. And I just think it's a big win, and if we can figure out a way to do that.
Right. Well, join me in a round of applause for our panelists today.